What up? It is the Week 2 Waiver Wire show here at 444 Fantasy. I am Matt Okada, and I am here solo. This is a solo show and will be every Monday morning from now until the end of the fantasy season. So if you're here, thanks for joining. If you're coming, hurry up because we're about to get into some good stuff. And if you stick around for the rest of the season, you rock. We are almost done with week 1. Because it is Monday morning, there's one game left to play. Jets and 49ers tonight on Monday Night Football should be an absolute banger. We have a bit of a look ahead to that game in the top 5 waiver ads, which are coming up in a second. Spoiler alert. But the rest of the waiver ads, the top waiver ads of the week, come from this past several games of action, both yesterday on Sunday and from earlier this week on the Thursday and Friday games. There was a lot. There was a lot this week. It's week 1. We knew there was going to be a lot. So there's a lot to get to here. We will go through the top 5. If you want to see the rest, and there are many, many, many more, go check out the article at 444, which should be publishing, I think, any minute now. It is 9:01 a.m. Pacific time. And I have covered every valuable ad, some stashes, some guys you should probably just be dropping out the gate. I've got recommended fab bids on the big guys. It's a whole bunch of goodness. Also, once we get through these top 5 on this show, there will be a Q&A section. So drop questions in the comments of wherever you're watching this, and I will get to them at the end. But without further ado, let's get to the top 5 ads of the week. Just kidding. We're going to get to the top 6 ads of the week because I have one tiny little bonus ad before we get to the actual top 5. The reason he's not technically in the top 5 is because he's more than 60% rostered in Yahoo leagues, which is our cutoff for the waiver wire article. But Khalil Shakir, just throwing this out there because he's 62% rostered in Yahoo leagues. So he almost counts, and he was one of my favorite sleepers of this offseason. So I have to shout him out. He put together 42 yards and a touchdown yesterday against the Cardinals. Several eye-catching plays. It seems like every time he caught the ball, he was breaking tackles and gaining extra yards. Only Keon Coleman with 22 routes and Dalton Kincaid with 21 routes ran more than Shakir. Curtis Samuel had far fewer, about half of Shakir's number. And Shakir honestly looked like the best receiver, in my opinion. His 11-yard touchdown was an amazing effort. Go watch the highlights if you haven't. Get him on your roster if he's available. In the waiver article, I put him at about 13 to 16% fab budget, and he would be in the top 3 or 4 ads if you have waiver priority. But let's get to the actual names now. So all of these guys are rostered in less than 60% of Yahoo leagues, which means they should be pretty available. And we will start out with number 1, probably not too surprising to anyone who watched the kickoff game last week, and that is Isaiah Likely, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens. Now, off the bat, let's be clear. We are not panicking about Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is going to be good. He had a motor vehicle accident a little while ago in the offseason, and we believe that there's a bit of an injury that came out of that Harbaugh, Coach John Harbaugh hasn't been super clear about, and that he's probably still recovering from that. He did not look full speed on Thursday. Isaiah Likely, however, did. And holy mackerel, did it pan out for him. 9 catches, 111 yards, 1 touchdown, and was about this far. For the podcast listeners, I'm holding up an inch worth of space between my fingers from having another catch, another 10 yards, and another touchdown at the very, very end of the game. His toe was barely on the white. Unfortunate. However, to my earlier point about Andrews, I do not think that this is a Likely is replacing Andrews as the tight end of the Ravens, and that would insinuate that if Andrews does get fully healthy and takes back over his main role, that Likely would disappear. I don't see that being the case. These two were on the field together a ton of this game, and Likely just looked amazing, and he has looked amazing every time he's got an opportunity previously, mostly with Andrews being out. But in this new system, it looks like they're willing to use them both, and Likely looks like he may be the legitimate best, alpha receiver in this group. Yes, Rashad Bateman has some flashes, and yes, he gets open. He has proven at this point to me that he's not an alpha number 1. He will make some plays every now and then. Zay Flowers, he got a lot of targets, 10 of them, I believe, which was still 2 less than Isaiah Likely. but he is an underneath guy, a possession guy. He's better in PPR, but I don't see him as the alpha either. He's not a touchdown threat. He's very small. To me, Isaiah Likely has the best chance right now to step into like the top dog, top receiver role in Baltimore. Andrews will obviously catch up, start getting his touchdowns as he always does, but I think Likely sticks around, and as a result is a weekly start at the tight end position, which makes him an absolute must-add because from what we saw in week one, that position is shallower than we would have liked it to be. I recommended around 20% of Fab as a max budget for Likely, and he's the number one overall add in priority. So that's Isaiah Likely. If you don't have a tight end, smash. Number 2, this one is less position specific because every team could use adding J.K. Dobbins, running back for the Chargers now, not the Ravens, rostered in 49% of Yahoo leagues, so he is a little less available. I recommended a pretty similar budget bid for Dobbins as I did for Likely. The only reason he's number 2 and Likely is number 1 in the overall waiver priority is because of positional scarcity. However, Dobbins may be the ad of the year. Maybe. We will not know that for several more weeks. However, through 1 week, he looked like the hot hand in Los Angeles. We heard Greg Roman talking not too long ago about the Chargers will go with the hot hand at running back. Through 1 week, it was absolutely J.K. Dobbins. It was not Gus Edwards. They did split the opportunities pretty evenly. Dobbins had 13. Edwards had 12. And he did outsnap Edwards by a good amount, 32 to 22. Really, the standout difference was the efficiency. Dobbins rushed for 135 yards on his 10 carries, including runs of 46 and 61 yards, and had a 12-yard rushing touchdown. Gus Edwards rushed for 26 yards and 11 carries. So that's 13.5 yards per carry for Dobbins and 2.4 for Edwards. That's almost 5 times better for Dobbins, and he was also more involved as a receiver. The one negative, besides the fact that Edwards was obviously still heavily involved, is that on both of Dobbins' breakaway runs, you could absolutely tell that he lost a gear or 2 or 3 by the end of the run. He is clearly still not 100% back from the Achilles injury he suffered last year. And by not 100% back, I mean he clearly has the explosiveness, and he doesn't look like he's feeling the pain of the injury or is entirely hampered by it. However, over the course of a 60-yard long speed run, it looks like he's still getting back to the ability to stay at 100% speed for that entire range. So that just means to me that there is still room to grow for Dobbins, because had he had his full gear, the Dobbins we've seen in the past, for both of those runs, those both would have been touchdowns of many more yards, and his game would have he might be the number 1 RB on the week, challenging Saquon Barkley. Would have been close. So it is entirely possible that he recovers more of that long speed further in the season and just completely supplants Edwards as the lead back in this offense. And if he does that in Jim Harbaugh's offense, he's going to be an RB1, or at least he has a very good chance to do so. On the other hand, it is entirely possible that Edwards leads the backfield in every single category next week, and this duo is just a conundrum for the rest of the year. That's the only reason we're not blowing 30 to 40% of our fab budget on Dobbins out of the gate. We really need to see a couple more weeks to know and how this hot hand approach does play out for the Chargers. So I put the bid at 20%. He is the number 2 ad behind Likely. Could be number 1 if you're in need of a running back. Let's go to number 3. Number 3 is Rasheed Shaheed, wide receiver for the Saints, rostered in 54% of Yahoo leagues. So he's pretty heavily rostered, but absolutely worth checking your waiver wire to see if he is there. I put the bid at around 8 to 9%, so nowhere near as high as these first 2 guys. And the reason for that is the type of player Shaheed is. We came into this season thinking he's a big play receiver. He's probably better in best ball. I don't know if I'm going to run him out there in my lineup leagues. Well, he's still a big play receiver, and we definitely saw that in week 1. He'll probably still be better in best ball, but he might actually be frequently startable in lineup leagues. He started off the game against the Panthers with a 59-yard bomb touchdown from Derek Carr that was beautifully thrown. Derek Carr looked incredible, by the way. Perhaps a lot of that, maybe most of it, is due to the fact that he was playing the Carolina Panthers. He completed almost 83% of his passes, 200 yards, 3 touchdowns, 142.5 passer rating. unless Derek Carr is on an MVP track, that's probably not going to be the case every week. However, it doesn't need to be quite that good every week for Shaheed to be valuable. He matched Alvin Kamara for the team lead in targets in this game with just 5. They didn't have to throw that much, obviously, leading the entire game. He had 95 air yards, which was a 42% air yards share, highest on the team by far. Chris Olave had just 13 air yards, 2 targets. He trailed all 3 Saints tight ends in that metric, so that was really rough for Olave, and I expect he will bounce back in that category, which means Shaheed will probably regress a little bit in that category. All these things being said, essentially, I don't expect this kind of production every week from Shaheed. He's not going to be the most reliable player, which is why he's only an 8 to 9% fab type of guy. However, if Carr is going to be decent and Olave is not going to demand 10 targets a game and Shaheed's going to play this well, and we saw the talent in flashes from him last year, I think there is a very decent chance that he is playable more often than not, or at least playable often enough to be worth rostering, throwing into your flex every now and then for the upside. This team doesn't have a true number 2 pass catcher behind Olave unless you count Kamara, who's out of the backfield, obviously. They have a bevy of tight ends, and they have Rasheed Shaheed. Someone from that group is going to be scoring fantasy points on a weekly basis, and I think Shaheed might do it more often than not. So, Adam. Coming in at number 4 on the list is Tank Bigsby. This is not a name I think we expected to be talking about in the waiver wire week 2, unless there had been an injury to Travis Etienne, which there was not. However, they matched carries in week 1. Bigsby had 12, Etienne had 12, and to the chagrin of all Etienne managers and the excitement of the no Bigsby managers, so technically 5% of Yahoo leagues, Bigsby outgained Etienne by 29 yards on the ground. So he looked better in this game, at least rushing the ball. He did not get the touchdown opportunity Etienne did. So it's not like Etienne is being overtaken by Bigsby right now. However, it is worth hearkening back to a quote from Doug Peterson earlier in this offseason, who, by the way, is rated highly in the Coach Speak Index's usage and workload portion of how reliable a coach is. He said back in March, we have to get Tank going, bottom line. He is too good. That's why we drafted him. He is a young player that we're excited about. Like we talked about last year, we take some burden off of Etienne a little bit, keep him healthy for the remainder of the season. Obviously, Etienne shouldered a massive workload of touches last year, and it looks like from what Peterson said back in March and what he showed in week 1, that the Jaguars are legitimately interested in keeping Etienne from that workload and involving Bigsby throughout the season. And based off what we saw from Bigsby from a effectiveness and efficiency standpoint, I don't see that changing because he looked very good when he got his touches. He had looked like a draft bust early on in his career, but this was a very nice showing. So I like throwing in 7 to 8% of fab on Tank Bigsby for 2 reasons. One, because it legitimately looks like he might be a flexible guy in some weeks, especially once buys start to hit, if he's getting, double-digit opportunities and rushing efficiently. But 2, if Etienne does suffer an injury at any point, this could make Bigsby legitimate RB1. Because if he's playing well, which it looks like he is, and if he's involved enough in the offense to immediately pick up that role if Etienne gets injured, I think there's a very good chance that Bigsby becomes one of the better handcuffs in fantasy. So he should absolutely go and be rostered. We'll get to number 5 in a second. If you have questions, throw them in chats wherever you are, Twitter, X, YouTube. Throw questions in chat because we'll hop into any questions that are in there after this last player. It is Jordan Mason. Number 5 is Jordan Mason of the San Francisco 49ers, who has not played a game this season because it is Monday morning and he plays on Monday Night Football. However, we don't need to see him play a game to believe that Jordan Mason should be added. Obviously, if anything happens to CMC or if he looks severely hampered tonight, the bid number on Jordan Mason should go way, way up. Right now, I have him at 5 to 6%. That's because it is essentially entirely actually picking up a handcuff to Christian McCaffrey. However, let's point some things out. One, The handcuff to Christian McCaffrey is one of the most valuable roles in fantasy. Being the number 2 in the depth chart in the San Francisco 49ers offense for Kyle Shanahan is about as valuable as it can get. If CMC were to go down and Mason were to take over, which it looks like he would do as the clear-cut number 2 right now, Elijah Mitchell out for the season, by the way, Mason would have legitimate RB1 opportunity. So rostered in 37% of leagues, he should be rostered in 80, 90%. He should be arguably the top handcuff, one of the top handcuffs that's not contributing otherwise, aka Tank Bigsby, somebody who could put up fantasy numbers if the main guy is still healthy. The other thing to note is that McCaffrey is already dealing with injury. He has a calf/Achilles strain that he suffered early in training camp. It kept him out of practice for roughly a month and generates more than a little concern. He just got back to practice before week 1 rolled around. Obviously got some extra time coming into Monday Night Football, but does not seem to be fully healthy coming into this game. So watch McCaffrey in this game. I would not be surprised if he's a little bit slower or sees a little bit less workload. I write an article for NFL.com about over-under the projected fantasy points for players, and I took the under on Christian McCaffrey because I think he comes into this game and we don't see the full-blown Christian McCaffrey that we're used to seeing, where it's 25 touches, well over 20 fantasy points, multiple touchdown opportunities, 150 scrimmage yards, all that goodness. If we see any of that, if he looks hampered at all, Jordan Mason's value goes up. And obviously, if anything happens to CMC, Jordan Mason's value skyrockets. So stash him away if you can. That is the top 5 on the week 2 waiver list. Isaiah Likely, J.K. Dobbins, Rasheed Shaheed, Tank Bigsby, and Jordan Mason. There are a ton more names in the article. So if these guys aren't available, or if you need someone at a different position, like a quarterback, there's a couple guys in there very worth adding. Go check out the article. It's a ton of goodness. It is 4,000 words long. Whoo-wee! It was a lot. It might be less in future weeks, but this was week 1, so we had to go crazy. Let's get into some questions. Demetrios, I have DK Metcalf busy this year. Maybe he means bust. Also, I have George Kittle. The other opponent is Christian McCaffrey. Nervous about this. Any thoughts? Well, it depends on what your lead is. You should be nervous about Christian McCaffrey, but as I just said, I do believe McCaffrey might be a little bit less productive than he normally is. So if the projections are close and McCaffrey's projection for like 20 points, I would be a little bit optimistic that he might go a little under that and you might be okay. Oh, yeah, he did mean bust. He corrected it later. Is DK Metcalf a bust? No. I am not willing to call DK Metcalf a bust yet. The Seahawks had a pretty ugly game. It was weird. Tyler Lockett dominated work. He had 6 catches for 77 yards on 7 targets. Metcalf only had 4 targets, 3 catches, 29 yards. It is not what you wanted to see. I fully understand that. I was very hyped up on DK Metcalf, so this was disappointing for me. But I do not believe that this is the end-all, be-all for DK Metcalf this year. I have not looked at the numbers for the entire game, but from what I saw early on, he was being blanketed by Patrick Surtain. That is arguably the best corner in the entire league. I don't expect that to be the case every week. It's impossible for that to be the case every week because there are not Surtains on every league or every team that DK Metcalf will be facing. So he will be better. I think this could honestly be his worst game of the year. If you want to go trade for DK Metcalf, I would be more interested in that than calling him a bust. So no worries about that, Demetrios. Clint Raderman asks, any insight on the New Orleans tight end room? Will all 3 be valuable this year? Very interesting question. So both Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson scored a touchdown against the Panthers. Moreau had 4 catches on 4 targets for 43 yards. He's one of the highest scoring tight ends in fantasy right now because everybody who mattered pretty much busted, most everybody who mattered. And then Taysom Hill also had a catch on 2 targets and then 35 rushing yards on 5 carries. Are all 3 going to be valuable this year? No, I will say probably not. The Saints scored 47 points in this game against the Panthers, absolutely obliterated them. And so 2 of these guys had a touchdown, and Taysom Hill is the guy that we kind of like to maybe be the most had the most upside week to week. I would lean towards Juwan Johnson as the most reliable. He is coming off injury, so I think that could be some of the reason that Moreau got a little more work. However, to be perfectly honest, we have not seen the two of them in action together all that much. It's possible that Moreau supplants Juwan Johnson and is the more valuable of the two. I think it's also very possible, perhaps most likely, that the two of them just vulture each other year round, and neither is that good. And for that reason, I'm most likely to continue leading into Taysom Hill. I know he only had like 4 fantasy points in this game, depending on your format. But again, they were leading for the entire game. I think he'll get a little more work when they're not. And I don't expect them to be winning by 40 points most of this season. This was the Panthers, who might be the worst team in the league and maybe the worst team we've seen in the league in many years. So that won't be normal. Taysom Hill, I think, will continue to be valuable. But with both these guys getting snaps and being involved, it's possible Taysom Hill doesn't have quite the upside. So I think it's more like all these guys, none of these guys are valuable than all 3 of them are. Keep an eye on how snaps, routes, targets, and touches for Taysom play out in the coming weeks. Reynaldo Rincon asks, should I drop Joshua Palmer for Jordan Mason? Tough. We really liked Joshua Palmer as a sleeper, both John Paulson and I, coming into this year, but he had 4 targets, only 2 catches, and 15 yards against the Raiders. It was not pretty. Ladd McConkey was much more involved. Quentin Johnson was much more involved. Nobody was really that good. McConkey did catch a touchdown, so that worked out for him. I will say yes in this case because of the upside of Jordan Mason. I would drop Joshua Palmer for him, especially if Joshua Palmer is like your 5th or 6th wide receiver and you don't expect to be starting him. If anything, I think his role could diminish as the year goes on and McConkey takes over more. So I would make that move. Zooplanktons says, just traded Jerome Ford for Brian Robinson. Thoughts? I like it. Brian Robinson looked pretty good against the Buccaneers in week 1. It was a loss for the Commanders. So Brian Robinson, well, I don't know how many games they're going to win. So I don't know if I can say Brian Robinson will be better in games that they're leading. But he had 12 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. He also had 4 targets, 3 catches, and took those catches for 49 yards with a 32-yarder in there. So looked very effective. Austin Eckler also looked pretty decent. 4 catches for 52 yards for him, but he did not get the rushing workload. Brian Robinson had 12 carries. Eckler only had 2. Jaden Daniels was the leading rusher in every category with 16 carries, 88 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that's the real issue for Brian Robinson is Jaden Daniels is going to be taking all kinds of work away. I still think that he will be good. I think he will be like a fringe RB2 for most of the year, maybe a mid-range RB2 for a lot of those games. And Jerome Ford is basically that or worse, given how bad the Browns offense and Deshaun Watson looked. And that's only until Nick Chubb comes back, and then Jerome Ford probably disappears. So I like this mood. I think you get a little bit of an upgrade for the near term, and then you end up with a startable asset late year when Jerome Ford is on the bench. So I like that. Josh Perry says he started Shaheed this week. Well done, Josh Perry. I also did that in the Scott Fish Bowl, where you get return points, and he got 32 points or 36 points by the end of the week. It was beautiful. I loved it. David W. says, I picked up a lot of Paulson's recommended guys such as Zamir White, Marvin Harrison Jr., Deontay Johnson. Should we be worried? No, and no. The most likely worry should be Zamir White because he was not pretty in this game. 13 carries for 44 yards in the loss to the Chargers. It was bad. And more importantly, or more concerningly, Alexander Mattison looked better and was involved as a receiver. 6 targets to Zamir White's 2. And Mattison caught 6 of them for 58 yards. No, sorry, 4 of them for 43 yards, but also a touchdown, a really nice touchdown, the only one the Raiders scored. So it looks like Mattison could be more involved than we would have liked. We wanted Zamir White to be a legit bell cow, and it looks like that may not be the case. And he probably needs it with the lack of efficiency and with how bad this Raiders offense is. So we should be a little bit worried, I think, on Zamir White. He goes from maybe being one of the best RBs in that dead zone who could be a medium RB2 with the workload to maybe he's more of a fringe RB3, RB2, but I think you're still rolling him out there in flex spots, and you're certainly not dropping him. Harrison and Deontay Johnson, I'm not worried about at all. The usage for Harrison was wacky. He ran the most routes on the team, but he just did not get the targets. I don't know why. He was wide open on a potential touchdown near the end of the game. Kyler Murray missed him on a couple targets. I think that he will be better. He's a rookie in his debut game. This should get much better for Marvin Harrison Jr. If it doesn't, he's going to be one of the biggest busts in the NFL draft and in fantasy, and I just don't think that's going to happen. So no worries about Harrison. And Deontay Johnson, I also don't worry about. He actually had a massive target share for the Panthers before they fell behind by a gazillion points, and I believe he just ended up sitting for much of the later half of the game. So I think Deontay Johnson will be the leading target getter and receiver for the Panthers. It's not going to be amazing week to week because Bryce Young and this team, it looks like, are not fixed by any stretch. So the efficiency might not be great, but I think Deontay Johnson will get catches and be good in PPR. Rob H asks, rest of season ranking projection for Likely and Dobbins, trying to decide who to drop. Great question. I will put Likely at around tight end 8, maybe higher. It could easily climb to 7 or 6 in a couple of weeks. We will see. That's actually pretty high, though, 8, even out of the gate. 8 to 9 for now. Dobbins is really tough. It's nearly impossible to put a number on him. I will say for now, RB 24. This is very off the top of my head. I don't have rankings for rest of season pulled up in front of me right now or set in place yet. So don't hold me to this too harshly, Rob. But I really like adding both. And Dobbins could be much higher than that if he keeps this hot hand, and much lower than that if he splits work with Edwards every week, or if Edwards has weeks as the hot hand. So that's why he's hard to rank. Likely, I really do think it will be good. D. Kutch adds, would you drop Freiermuth for Likely? Only other droppable one would be Jordan Mason, but want to hold him. Wow, this is tough. If you follow me in the offseason and all, you know that I love Pat Freiermuth. He was one of my favorite sleepers at the tight end position, and he had a decent game, I believe. Let me check. 4 catches, 4 targets, 27 yards. The yards weren't great. Justin Fields threw 156 total. It was not pretty for the Steelers offense. They scored no touchdowns. I think that they will score touchdowns in the future, and Freiermuth should be a beneficiary of that. So I like him. However, I think he's right there next to Likely in that 8 to 9 range. I will say that if you're looking for upside, I would prefer Freiermuth. Likely. If you want the safer play, I think it might be Freiermuth still, because there is still a chance that Likely does fall off a little bit when Andrews gets more healthy. Despite what I said earlier, I don't believe that will be the case, but it's possible. So I probably would do it. I would probably drop Freiermuth for Likely in most leagues. Rudy UHDE, I won't try to pronounce that, asks, missed the first part of the show, but any thoughts on holding on to Blake Corum? I did not mention him, but he didn't get a single offensive snap. So my answer for now is no. Do not hold on to Blake Corum. If any of the guys that we talked about here, or that are in the top 10 of my waiver list in the article, or maybe even that are in the top 20 in my waiver list in the article, are available, I am not holding on to a guy who got no offensive snaps. Kyren Williams is the guy here. This game was a little weird. They threw the ball a gazillion times and didn't rush at all, but I'm not interested in Blake Corum right now. If it comes back to a point where he starts getting involved, you can add him back off waivers if you really want to. I don't think that's the case. Do you think Malik Willis, will start for the Packers? There are no QBs in the waiver wire in my super flex league, and I lost Love. That is very tough. He is going to start if they don't go and acquire somebody. So if there are literally no QBs in the waiver wire, you can grab him. I will throw out there, by the way, let me just check real quick before I say something really stupid. I believe that the backup quarterback for the Cleveland Browns is Jameis Winston. That is correct. Deshaun Watson looked terrible. If Jameis Winston isn't stashed away in your league, feel free to add him, because I don't think it's impossible that they just move off to Deshaun Watson at some point this year and try out Jameis Winston. So I will throw that out there. X Factor asks, thoughts on Jameson Williams? Wow. Wow is my thoughts on Jameson Williams. 9 targets, 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown. A 52-yard touchdown, by the way, in the overtime win for the Lions over the Rams. He looked great. He was involved. Head coach, Dan Campbell said earlier this offseason that he wanted to get Jameson Williams involved and that Jameson Williams looked like a man on a mission. He looked like a man on a mission in this game. He was involved. And Campbell said in the presser after the game, I believe, that he wasn't even as good as he could be. So this could be a breakout, big breakout for Jameson Williams. It's been expected for his truthers, his college truthers. It might actually be happening. Yeah, really like this. Really like the upside for Jameson Williams. I don't think he's going to be on waivers, but if you have him, well done. Is there a solid defense after this weekend's games? KC, question mark. This is from McIntosh Fam. The one defense I put in my waiver list is the Chargers. They are rostered in 11% of Yahoo leagues, so they should be available. They had 4 sacks, interception, 2 fumble recoveries, and allowed just 10 points to the Raiders. Obviously, it's the Raiders. They're not very good. But Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Derwin James, this team should have been talented on defense for many, many years. Brandon Staley was a terrible head coach. I think that played a part of it. Injuries played a part of it, and they haven't put it together as a good defense. This might finally be it. And in week 2, they get the Carolina Panthers. So if the Chargers are available, everybody should go add them and start them. I don't care if you have the Cowboys on your team. The Chargers might be scoring 20 points next week. Let's see. We'll skip a couple who have asked or gotten multiple questions already. Let's go to Derek. I have top waiver position and will add likely. Thoughts on offering likely / Deontay for Tank Dell? My wide receivers are Garrett Wilson, T. Higgins, Jaden Reed, Deontay Johnson, Khalil Shakir, Andre Yoshivas, and Joshua Palmer in PPR. Wow, so it's a lot. It depends on who your other tight end is, Derek. It is in the next comment. Well done. Looking ahead. Tight end is Kincaid. Well, that makes it tough because Dalton Kincaid was a ghost in the Bills-Cardinals game this week. I believe he had 2 targets, 1 catch. Let me double check. That is correct, for 11 yards. It was rough. Dalton Kincaid managers are panicking. For that reason, listen, I think Dalton Kincaid's still going to be good, but for that reason, I might not make this trade. I might hold on to likely just to see because he might be the better tight end for you. Additionally, I do not think you want to trade Deontay Johnson right now based off what we said earlier. He's a sell low right now based off the box score from week 1, but was very involved and I think will be better. So I'd try to hold on to Deontay for another week or 2. I might be more interested in trading T. Higgins on name value. Obviously, he missed this game, the week 1 game, but that offense, it's questionable. They lost to the Patriots. It was ugly. How much fab would you spend on Chicago's D, said AG? I'm putting this question here to answer a blanket answer for everybody for the future. I'm never spending more than $1 or $2 on a defense, unless, I don't know, they're looking like the best defense in the league and have great matchups for the next few weeks. Then I might spend 3 or 4. And let's see who the Bears get next week. They have the Texans, who I don't want to throw out my defense against. So I am not spending up big on the Chicago defense, AG. I don't even know if I'd be adding them this week. Add the Chargers instead. Bryce Young or Daniel Jones, who's worse? This is McIntosh Fam again. Wow, tough question. They are both garbage. Can you really compare the trash can and the recycling bin? I'm going to go with Daniel Jones is worse because I feel very confident that we've seen everything we're going to see from him. That he's reached his peak, and his peak is in the gutter. Oh my gosh, is he bad? Bryce Young, I still have the tiniest bit of faith can improve. Maybe a full year under Dave Canales, or at least maybe a month or 2 under Dave Canales will get him going. Yes, Daniel Jones is worth. Senor Rojo asks thoughts on Guerendo, Isaac Guerendo, who is further down on the depth chart for the 49ers behind Jordan Mason. If you're in a very, very, very deep league, Senor, you could add him because it's not impossible that he supplants Mason as the RB2. And if something happens to CMC, he's the handcuff. but I don't believe that's the case. The depth chart would say otherwise. So I'm adding Mason for now. Sammy Thomas says, I traded Derrick Henry and Jaden Reed for Evan Ingram, DK Metcalf, and Najee Harris. Thoughts? I don't hate it. If Evan Ingram is going to be your starting tight end, I do not hate it. I like DK Metcalf better than Jaden Reed, despite what we saw in week 1. I like Derrick Henry better than Najee Harris, also kind of despite what we saw in week 1. But the free Evan Ingram on top, if he's going to be your starting tight end, is good. So I like that. Any other questions here? Ooh, what D. Kutch asks, Zamir White, Eckler, Brian Thomas Jr., Jordan Mason, and Jacoby Myers on the bench could drop Jacoby. I think this is a question. It was repeated, or it was a reply to McIntosh Fam. Yes, you should drop Jacoby Myers if that is your crew. I like everybody else there better. I know Jacoby Myers had a decent game, but I think those will come in spurts when Devontae Adams has less great games. Rob asks, I hit the RB lottery, JT, Saquon, Ramondre, JK, and Kamara. Wow, well done, sir. But my wide receivers are the worst in my league. Who would you trade out wide for a wide receiver 1, and who would you target? This is a great question. It's tough. I would probably trade Ramondre if I had to trade one of these guys outright. I don't know if you're not going to get a wide receiver 1 for him. If you're trying to get a wide receiver 1, it's going to have to be JT or Saquon. But if you want to get a startable wide receiver, a wide receiver 2, perhaps you might be able to get one for Ramondre. And he had an incredibly good game. Let me pull up the stats real quick. 25 carries for 120 yards. However, that was because the Patriots were winning this entire game against the Bengals. I do not expect that to be the case year-round. The Patriots should be one of the worst teams in the league, but the Bengals came into this in shambles between the Chase holdout and the Higgins injury, missing the game. It was a mess for them. They looked really, really bad, and they were never leading in this game. I don't expect that to be the case for the Patriots. So I think still think Ramondre will be good, and he can be a pass catcher when they're trailing, but I don't think he'll be maybe quite this good. And if you can convince someone to give you a mid to high range wide receiver 2 based off of this performance, I would try to do that. DK Metcalf would be an interesting guy to go for. I think you could probably make a Ramondre for DK Metcalf trade based off what happened in week 1, and I think DK Metcalf will be better year-round. Maybe Ramondre is a little better than DK Metcalf. I don't know if you for sure want to make that trade, but with your depth and your lack of wide receiver depth, I probably would do it. Robert Lavelle asks, what is going on with Raheem Mostert and Christian Kirk? Raheem Mostert is going to be hit and miss likely for much of the year. Just the case. Notable, though, Devon Achane may be dealing with an injury, so monitor that. If Achane is out, Raheem Mostert should get more work. I think Mostert may also have gotten banged up in this game, so that could be part of it. As for Christian Kirk, it was not pretty for the Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence completed 12 passes. Christian Kirk caught 1 of them, 4 targets. That catch did go for 30 yards. This team was all in all ugly. I'm not sure who Jalen Ramsey was covering this game. It would be worth looking into that. But I think Christian Kirk will have better games in the future, so not a complete panic here. Anything else here? To Robert, I believe they will both be fantasy relevant, though maybe not super excited. D. Kutch says, dropping a player for likely, deciding between Freiermuth and Jacoby Myers to get likely. It would be Freiermuth for me because I don't think you need to have 2 tight ends. And Jacoby Myers is a flexible guy. Any final questions? Let's go to this. McIntosh Fam will close it out here. Matt, who's the backup? Thank you, McIntosh Fam, for all your involvement in the chat, by the way. Who's the backup to Tyreek after Waddle injury? Thoughts on Demarcus Robinson, add off the waiver wire, and Fab? Great question. For the latter half of your question, go to the waiver wire article on 444. If it's not published yet, which it should be now or any minute, it will be by, I don't know, noon Pacific time at the absolute latest. And Demarcus Robinson is in there, along with Tyler Johnson, the other Rams receiver, who I might even like a little bit better. Both of them and their fab are in there, so go check that out. You may need to sign up. Well, that's pointing the wrong way at 444.com/plans. Use that promo code to check that out. As for the backup wide receiver in Miami to Jalen Waddle, if Jalen Waddle misses time, I will say it is Malik Washington. A little bit of hype there for a rookie, low drafted. Because other than that, it is like Braxton Berrios and Grant Dubose on the depth chart, and neither of those guys give me any hope. So I would consider Malik Washington a decent add if Jalen Waddle is injured. Let me pull up Jalen Waddle really quick and see if it was a head injury, so possible concussion. He emerged from the tent. I think he's okay. So I don't think that Jalen Waddle is dealing with an injury unless I missed something. Anything long-term at least. Okay, one last a question from Peter Drop McLaughlin. That is the Broncos running back, I would assume, for Alexander Madison, ? Thank you. Tough one. That is close. Let me pull up the Broncos stat line real quick. Jaleel McLaughlin had 10 carries for 27 yards. It was actually the most on the team in carries. It was very inefficient. He also had 5 catches on 5 targets for 1 yard. That has to be one of the most inefficient stat lines I've ever seen. Good gracious. 15 touches for 28 yards. The Broncos offense looked abysmal. Bo Nix looked abysmal. I think they should get a little better as the year goes on. And this kind of involvement for Jaleel McLaughlin tells me no, I'm not going to drop him. And also, the Raiders' offense is also going to be trash. So I would prefer Jaleel McLaughlin over Alexander Madison. But similar guys, good question. There's some good questions coming in real quick, so I have to hit them. Senor Rojo asked, do you think Whittington will get okay? I think he means play since Puka is injured. This is, I believe it is Jordan Whittington. The lack of knowledge of the first name tells you how deep we're going here in the waiver wire questions. It is Jordan Whittington. I do not think he will get play. I mean, I think he'll get some play. I think he had a catch after Puka exited the game. But I think that Tyler Johnson and Demarcus Robinson are the first couple guys up. And Colby Parkinson, the tight end, is more likely to get a boost in targets with Puka's injury. So I'm not adding Whittington at all. That answers Canton's question, by the way. How do you feel about the Rams tight end Parkinson? He is in the waiver wire article, Canton. Go check it out. I like him. Good ad. Let's close it there. That is the show. That is the waiver wire show. That was a whole lot of questions. Thank you guys for tuning in and asking all those questions. We will have quite the podcast and the show every week if we get that kind of involvement. So thanks a ton for coming in. That was awesome. Week 1, almost in the books. Jets, 49ers tonight should be an absolute banger. I'm really excited about it. Go Aaron Rodgers for my old guys who were injured. Quarterbacks being good this year because Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford. Well, Matthew Stafford ended up being pretty good. Hey, so I'm like 1 for 2 so far. All right. Signing off. Catch you all in the Friday pod with John Paulson. In the article, the waiver wire article, if you go check it out, 44.com/plans. Use that promo code. And then next week, back here, Monday morning, bright and early Pacific time. That's it. See you later. Adios.